Hi everyone, welcome back to the Hugs and Kisses podcast. My name is Salamata Diallo and I am your host. Today we have a very special guest. I'm in the studio with Dani Suarez. Hi Dani, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, Dani and I have already recorded this episode and it was definitely one of my favorites and you guys haven't gotten to see it. So we're gonna give it a little redo. Introduce yourself for the people. What do you do on campus?
Okay, hi everyone, my name is Dani. I am a senior here. I have done a lot of things like ever since freshman year, but currently I am a part of the student government, so I have a VP position on that, working with student clubs. And then I am also involved with Greek life, so I'm a part of a sorority called Corazones Unidos Siempre, Chi Epsilon Sigma National Sorority Incorporated. And then I also work with the Alumni Engagement Office, so pretty cool stuff.
Dani is a really involved person, and when I met you, you had just become an RA. What would you say is the biggest difference from that time to now being a senior?
Okay, so definitely I think that I've taken a step back from being so involved on campus. I know I still listed a lot of things, but the things that I am involved with also are easier to some things are easier to compartmentalize. So I think now that I'm not an RA, since I'm not living on campus, I think that has helped me a lot in terms of my mental health. So I definitely feel like I'm in a very different state than the first time we talked.
Yeah. How have you learned to take care of your mental health differently in this season of your life versus that time?
Like I said, separating things I think helps a lot. I think also the places, so having a designated place to do a designated thing, I've been trying to create those spaces, and for example, the biggest thing was staying in my room. So staying in my room now, it's okay, at least one area of my room I'm going to dedicate it to. That's where I only do homework. So at least I find spots like that. So honestly, that's been helping.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like when I'm always in my room, I have to be okay, I'm doing homework at the desk. Don't open your computer on your bed if you're doing homework. Save that for watching TV and stuff. And I think it helps your brain organize things and take care of each area of your life more targeted. I feel if that makes sense. It gets you to focus on the things that you're supposed to be doing a lot easier than if you're just rattled off doing a bunch of things. I know you mentioned that you've stepped back, I think, publicly from being on campus and doing so many roles that are public facing by being on e-boards, and you were in a student association. How would you say that has helped you become a better student, because you are in your last year?
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to every year of schoolwork, I think everything does change. I would say that I am able to put my foot down more, because I think it's so easy that once you get involved, you get pulled in to do a lot of these little things, and it's yes, I want to give back to my community, and I also want to do things to help the institution, but at the same time, that's not what I'm here for. Sometimes I would forget that I was a student as well, because I was so involved with more administrative things. So definitely putting my foot down and being okay, no, you should be spending this much time doing your homework rather than trying to fix things.
I agree with you. I think it's really important to remember that taking care of yourself is the first step of helping out any organization or club or association that you're a part of, because you need to be in a good space with yourself and with your course load, because at the end of the day, we are students, and the one goal coming out of year and the one thing that it will be largely measured for is your diploma. And so we have to remember to focus on the classes and do work, and also taking care of yourself helps us take care of the school in a better way, because you have been a person who I think when I think Oneonta, I do think Dani. I feel even looking at the pictures from Red Day the other day, it's just you do a lot on campus and you contribute to a lot of different offices. If I go to an event, I expect you to be there. I'm already okay, Dani's gonna be there, she's doing something with this organization somewhere somehow. Ultimately, what would be your advice on having a mental health routine as a student, especially being, I think we talked about last time, being first generation students, and sometimes you're the first of your kind to be in these spaces and in these rooms, and how do you take care of yourself when coming into these spaces where people may not look like you, and oftentimes they don't look like us?
So I feel the best advice I could give someone else is the best advice I could give myself, which is just like everything is not going to be perfect. Because even now, like you're asking, like, you know, how have you learned? And it's like, yes, I've learned some things, but a lot of things I'm still struggling in.
Yeah.
So just like the fact that like it's not gonna be perfect every single time, but also like owning up to, you know, the consequences of your own actions.
Yes, if it isn't the consequences of my actions.
I think, you know, once you acknowledge the consequences and you're like, hey, okay, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna move forward and I'm gonna do better, and then hold yourself accountable to that. I think that's really the best advice I could give someone.
I think that's really real. Like, accountability has to be one of like the biggest things in college, because it's also like nobody's stopping you and being like, okay, like, did you do your work? Like, nobody is being like, okay, like, did you eat your 3 meals a day? Like, nobody's really like checking in on you like that. Like, you know, sure, if you call your parents, but it's also like you don't live with them anymore. So the ways that you learn to take care of yourself has a lot to do with accountability, and like the trial and error of like being a college student. I feel like I'm a junior and I feel like I'm a completely different person than who I was walking in. And that's sort of the point. So yeah, I think that's really good advice, taking accountability. What is your major and why did you decide on that? Because, you know, we have a lot of classes together and I feel like talking to you about this is really interesting. So why did you land on your majors?
So I will say that my major right now, well, I love my major. I'm a political science major. I think I wouldn't have been able to continue my major if it wasn't for my 2 minors. So I minor in Africana and Latinx studies, and then as well as media studies. I think that the political science class that I took was global challenges, and I just really liked that we were discussing issues that were happening, because I felt like there was so many things that were happening in the world, and I'm over here sitting learning about something else. And I knew that that was like the space that I wanted to be in, and I think a lot of it came from like wanting to be an advocate. And I think especially coming here where the environment is completely different, and then I think it like it popped me out of my bubble. And so I was like, wow, like this stuff is really, really important. And that was kind of like my idea going into the major. The major obviously can be taken in many different ways, so I feel like I stuck with the major because there were a lot of classes that talked about things that I wanted to talk about and learn more about, and that's kind of, and then I just, you know, finished the major, like it just happened to be that way. But also I think that having a creative outlet and having a minor that's specifically like focused on the areas that I wanted to helped me like stay within that. Like I don't think I would have been able to stay a political science major if it wasn't for that.
So I started as a political science international studies major, and I didn't stay with it because I think for me, like, what you're saying is that like you're learning about very specific things that are happening like currently, but sometimes it's hard to like focus in on those classes, like you said, because it's not as like specified or like detailed as something like Africana and Latinx studies, or like women's and gender studies, where it's like there's a very specific focus as to like what you're studying. And I think for me, like I did need something more specific, like WGS, like land into a major I felt comfortable in. But being a media studies minor, how do you feel that you've gotten to like explore the department through the classes that like they offer?
So I think the intro level courses and then kind of the courses that are required where you go more into like a specific niche, that being like it's like journalism and then videography and then audio, and then I took obviously like the regular courses that are more like social science. So I got to see like the difference between all the different classes that are offered in the media minor. I'm actually considering dual minoring in media studies because I think I didn't get enough of it. Whereas it's like a creative outlet. And I need that.
Right, because when people like we get into final season, people are like, how many finals do you have? And I'm like, I only have 1 final, but like I'm making a music video. And it's like it seems really like dumb to like be like, oh my god, like I have to do this thing, and like we'll be stressing about like, oh my god, did you rent the camera, like do you have the mics, like do you have the lighting? But it gives you a creative outlet to, you know, exercise what you're studying in classes. And I think that's why I appreciate like our department so much, because you can get so much like hands-on experience. Like even with this podcast, I feel like I learned so much just like hosting this as like a media student, and it like allows me to use like what I've learned in my classes in something that I'm passionate about and something that I can like continue to contribute to the school.
And I think it's also about like creating something and being able to show people. Because I feel like, you know, a lot of the things that we learn about and that we know about come from media. And yeah, I feel like you cannot have a world without media.
I agree. And I try to remember, like, remind people, like, it's a bachelor's of science. Like, I know we are in a world where people think, like, STEM and, like, bio and tech and, like, that's all that we should care about. But there is something really important to be said about, like, studying social sciences. And, yeah, I think it's really cool because we get to, like, have those conversations offline and stuff. What is one piece of advice that you want to leave the listeners with today?
In terms of mental health, well, I always love a fresh new start, but sometimes you don't need a fresh new start. Like, I think when you think of fresh new start, that almost like sets you up for failure, or you're telling yourself that you need a fresh new start and let go of everything else that you've been working on. So kind of like how I said before, just evaluate what you're doing, and then from there take care of whatever parts that you feel like you've been neglecting. Because I think, you know, you're a student, and so being a student, you're like, okay, well, school is the first thing, and you might feel like you don't have time for other things. I know I definitely feel like that, but sometimes you might not have time to get through your entire reading, but like if you needed those hours of sleep, then you should go get those hours of sleep so that tomorrow, you know, you could just try your best again. I think you also mentioned something about first generation students. For first generation students, and honestly, this could apply for everybody, but going into a space, your experience is always going to be different. And just because it's different doesn't mean that it's like better or worse, because I think that like we are new to this space, like you said, and how we go about things is obviously going to be different and new than how other people have gone about things. So yeah, just normalizing that.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I'd definitely be texting Dani about like the craziness and be like, okay, what do you think? Like, what should I do? And like even our conversations over the summer, I think you give me like a lot of perspective on like how to be a more like positive person. And I do appreciate talking to you because what you said about like your experience as a first generation student, like not being less or like lesser or better than anyone else's, like it just is. It's something that like my dad emphasized for me when I was like showing up in a lot of different places. Because before I started middle school, like I was going to this like art school with like a lot of rich kids, and it's just like my dad was just like, okay, coming in, like there are gonna be people who like are smarter than you. Shocker to you, because like I'm a big-headed kid, I'll be honest. Like people that are gonna be smarter than you, people that are gonna have more money than you, and you just have to take that as a fact of life instead of something that you're going to see as like a deficit on your part, and that can, you know, make or break your experience, because instead of spending your 4 years here comparing yourself to other people and what you have and what you wish you had, you miss out on what's actually in front of you and like the opportunities you can actually take advantage of. And I think that's really important to remember as a first generation student, that like you're not doomed, and there are actually a lot of resources that are, you know, looking to help you.
That's a good one. Utilizing your resources.
Yeah, utilize your resources. And don't be afraid to ask for help, because, you know, there are people whose offices are literally here to help you as a student, especially a first generation student. So make sure you reach out to those people when you find, you know, all the ways that you can make your college experience easier for you, because this is a tough 4 years. Well, you're at the end of it.
No, but it was
I got a little go.
It's still getting tough. It's still tough.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Hugs and Kisses. Again, I'm your host, Salamata, and today's guest was Dani Suarez. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for
to us
having
chat.
me.